please. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I will try and keep this brief to keep us on schedule. But I wanted to do a quick overview of the campaign that we've been working on in South Korea since 2015, thinking it might be an interesting model, especially at this time with some significant progress being made. So my name is Lola Weber, and I am the Director of Campaigns to End the Dog and Cat Meat Trade for Humane Society International, and I'm also the International Coordinator for the Dog Meat Free Indonesia Coalition. So what we'll cover today very quickly is we'll do a quick overview of what the dog meat industry looks like in South Korea, looking at the scale and its operations, as well as touching on the drivers and motivations for dog meat consumption, and then move on to the campaign strategy that was deployed and launched in 2015, which includes primarily our Models for Change program, talking about how it started, why, and what progress and developments have happened since. So South Korea is unique. In most places in Asia where the dog meat trade is prevalent, dogs are routinely stolen from the streets or even from people's homes. But what we have in South Korea are these huge intensive dog meat farms. So on these farms, dogs are bred and raised, and they're kept in small cages like the one in this picture until they're of profitable weight, which is usually at around 1 year of age. At this point, they're taken either to be slaughtered at a slaughterhouse or slaughtered on site. And so the confinement and the suffering they endure is lifelong from when they're born on the farms. So there's inadequate provision of food, water, and usually there's absolutely no veterinary care at all. And a lot of the dogs have injuries from the cages, which are bare metal wire cages. And we know that mortality rates are high on these farms, ranging anywhere between 10 to 40%. The only legal method for slaughtering dogs in South Korea as it stands is electrocution, but other methods can be deployed. And we know that there are thousands of farms operating like this, hundreds of thousands of farms operating like this throughout the peninsula. Some are very small with just maybe 50 dogs. Others have over 2,000 dogs on these facilities. So as we've touched on in previous presentations, the motivations and drivers behind dog meat consumption vary in different territories, countries, cities. In South Korea, it's largely linked to dietary tradition, particularly over the summer months. So over the summer months, you have what are called the Boknal, or the Bok days, which according to the lunar calendar are the hottest days of the summer. And in South Korea, we fight fire with fire. So because dog meat is considered a hot food, it's most popular over the summer months. And our investigations and polls have showed that up to 90% of dog meat is actually consumed over these summer months, spanning from July to August. And dog meat is sold in hundreds, in thousands of restaurants, again, throughout the country. South Korea is also unique, not only with this farming system, but in also this dichotomy of the dog, clearly distinguishing between pet dogs for companionships and meat dogs for human consumption. So on the left hand of the screen, as you look at it, you'll see what are typically considered meat dogs in South Korea. That's two types of dogs, the large Tosa and the Jindo mix, or known as the Nurungi. And the dog meat industry will tell you that these are meat dogs. They're not the same as pet dogs, and they should be listed as livestock and regulated and treated as such. In contrast, they'll tell you that the dogs on the other side of the screen, also taken at a dog meat farm, are pet dogs. And these should be raised exclusively for companionship. Obviously, we know that there is no true distinction held in either reality or even amongst the industry. We find all sorts of different breeds of dogs on the farms, and actually puppy mills and dog farms are often one and the same location. But this came from the dog meat industry trying to appease growing concerns in South Korea. As pet ownership continued to rise rapidly, it was easier to sell dog meat if it was sold as a concept that there are different types of dogs. So legislation in South Korea up until now has always left dog meat essentially in legal limbo. Because different aspects of the trade fall under different ministries, under some laws, dogs are recognized as livestock and treated as such, whereas in other laws, they're not. So they essentially fall into a black hole where there are essentially no regulations. And the only true laws that can really be applied is the Animal Protection Act, but that has very weak penalties and is rarely enforced. So like we touched on just now, the industry repeatedly calls on meat dogs being listed as livestock, arguing that that will curtail a number of the welfare and human health risks associated with the industry. Of course, that's strongly rejected by the animal protection movement, not just in South Korea, but throughout the region. We're all unified in our position that there are no regulations that can be imposed. So our campaign strategy, based on what we knew, was to dispel this perception between different types of dogs, to ensure that there was compassion and respect for all breeds of dogs. It was also to discredit the unproven perceived medicinal properties of dog meat consumption and to promote alternatives to boshintang, which is the Korean word for dog meat soup, which is most popular over the summer months. To highlight the cruelty of the dog meat industry from farming through to trading and slaughter. And we also started working with the industry itself. And that was the launch of our Models for Change program, to really try and change the discourse by showing that the animal protection movement and the industry we're trying to change can actually work hand in hand. And all of this at the same time obviously was us working with the government and legislators to try and secure our campaign goal of ultimately securing a nationwide ban on dog meat production and consumption. So the concept of the Models for Change program is simple. Lend me your eyes and I'll change what you see. Lend me your heart and I'll change how you feel. Lend me your hands and I'll change what you do. So what this means is that by working with the dog meat industry, we can change what they do. We can change their livelihoods and thereby bring them on board to join our campaign and our calls for change. And this came from a recognition of meeting with countless dog meat farmers over many, many years. And they would all say the same thing. They would all say that they would leave the industry tomorrow if they were given a chance. It was sometimes due to societal pressure, family shame, low profits, but they all expressed a desire to leave. So the Models for Change program served a number of critical roles in our campaign, again referring back to the campaign strategy and what we were trying to achieve. So by working with the industry, we could essentially expose the reality of the dog meat industry and the life of dogs on dog meat farms. We could then, in turn, as we rescued these dogs, they could become the most incredible ambassadors or ambassadogs for our campaign to dispel the myths surrounding these meat dogs and to show that all dogs are the same and all equally deserving of compassion and respect. We could work with the farmers to transition them out of the dog meat industry and to transition them into humane, animal-free livelihoods. And we could increase public support for a ban, which when we started was relatively low, by showing that we can work with the farmers. And it was in recognition, on the points that we've touched on earlier, that there are sometimes concerns for people's livelihoods. So in South Korea, because it was an actual livelihood with invested infrastructure, there was concern amongst many members of the public about what would happen to these farmers. So by showing that we could work with them and transition them to economically viable, animal-free alternatives, it would help build public support and also create a blueprint that in time the government could follow. So the process goes through a number of steps. So firstly, it's a matter of identifying a farmer who is seeking to leave the industry behind. So we work with farmers who usually reach out to us. They express a desire to leave and a proposal for what livelihood they would like to transition into. And again, it's a key aspect that it's an animal-free livelihood. It's never a matter of replacing a dog suffering with that of any other species of animal. So once we work with the farmer, we sign a legally binding agreement and we start preparing the dogs for rescue. So as part of the agreement, any dogs that are on the farm at the time of closure come under the guardianship of Humane Society International. And so when we visit the farm, we vaccinate all of the dogs in line with export and import requirements, quarantine requirements. And so they're vaccinated on the farm and they're actually quarantined on the farm, which means for 30 days post-vaccination, they stay on the farm. And then when 30 days is complete and they've been health checked by the vet, they're ready to fly. And this is where traditionally they've always flown to North America, US or Canada, and also a small number to the US. And this creates also a great opportunity because it creates a lot of media interest and even political interest, where the media and often politicians will come to witness firsthand. And again, that is so powerful in raising vital public awareness, because sometimes seeing is believing. So just like many people in the UK, for example, wouldn't know what a pig farm looked like, most South Koreans didn't know what a dog meat farm looked like. So this is just some example of our happy farmers, some of which have transitioned into growing crops, others into investing in water delivery truck services. Okay, next. And again, touching on the vital public awareness and campaigning that it facilitated. So you see here, for example, up here you can see where there's virtual reality that we would do so people could really experience the life of a dog on a dog meat farm. We also acquired some celebrity ambassadors who adopted. That's our beautiful dog Juliet, who was adopted by Daniel Henney. We've done Subway ads. We've done photo exhibitions and also had politicians who've come and visited the dogs on the farm whilst we're doing the closures. And again, this one was one of my favorite campaigns of all time, called the I Love Toaster event, whereby it was about encouraging members of the public to actually meet these meat dogs. So they had heard all of these myths about what dangerous, stupid, soulless animals these were. But once you've met a toaster, there's no going back. And this here is one of our dogs, Abby, who featured in our Sophie Gamond portrait exhibition, again, really showcasing the beauty of dogs that have come from these dog meat farms. So why do we send them internationally? Obviously, in an ideal world, our ambassador dogs would stay in country, but unfortunately, there just isn't the capacity within South Korea. So a lot of these dogs are larger breed dogs, which makes rehoming locally within South Korea more difficult. Also, a lot of them have endured severe trauma from being born and living on these dog farms that requires expertise. And so there are just simply more rehoming opportunities. And this is just a picture of some of the over 2,700 dogs that have been rescued from dog meat farms as part of the program. So we are seeing a huge change in attitudes over the last 5 to 8 years. So now we're finally at a point where we have majority support for a ban. So back in 2017, there was only 35% of people in support for a ban, whereas now we're up to 57%. We also now have nearly 90% of the population who've either never consumed dog meat or don't intend to do so in the future. And like we touched on a bit before, pet ownership is now rising rapidly, and so that's increasing pressure on the government to better safeguard dogs. So there's now estimates that there are about nearly 5.5 million pet dogs in South Korea. So the political change we've seen recently has been incredible. And so it all started a number of years back where we would start working with the government to close the country's biggest slaughterhouses and markets. And we would see these frequent amendments to the Animal Protection Act to try and better safeguard companion animals. And then the real catalyst for change happened in September 2021, when President Moon asked the question, has the time not come to prudently consider a ban on dog meat consumption? And from that point on, we've seen the most incredible momentum for change. So after the question was asked by the then President Moon, he set up a cross-ministerial task force who was tasked with identifying a way of essentially phasing out and ending the dog meat industry. We then had the presidential elections, and in all major leading party presidential candidates, a ban on dog meat was included in the candidates' manifestos. We then had the First Lady openly speak out, and we had Seoul City considering a citywide ban on dog meat consumption. We've now had all political parties introducing special acts calling for a ban on the dog meat industry in South Korea. There are 5 different special acts that have been introduced spanning the main political parties. And in August of this year, there was an assembly resolution officially endorsing a dog meat ban. And that should say the 17th of November, not December. But on the 17th of November this year, the Ministry of Agriculture introduced a government-endorsed special act and an associated roadmap which would see an end to the dog meat industry within 3 years, which means that by 2027 in South Korea we could have an enforced dog meat ban. And this is the kind of political change that just a few years ago would never have dared dream possible. Whereas now we finally have a government-endorsed ban that will hopefully be discussed and passed into legislation before the end of the year. And these are some tosers. I told you, once you've met a toser, there's no going back. So thank you so much.
Okay.